All right, today we're going to dive into a book that did something pretty incredible. It built a bridge between two worlds you'd think have nothing in common. The book is The Tao of Physics by Fritjof Capra.
So where does a story like this begin? Well, you might think it's in some high-tech lab, right? Nope, it starts on a beach. It's the late 60s and physicist Fritjof Capra is just sitting there by the ocean. And then something happens. He has this vision. He sees everything, the waves, the sand, his own body just dissolve and become part of this gigantic cosmic dance. For a physicist, this is a huge moment because he realized this mystical vision felt exactly like what his equations and experiments were telling him about the very fabric of the universe.
And that experience sparked a massive question, one that's really at the core of everything we're talking about today. What if? What if modern science, the cutting edge of physics, and ancient wisdom from the East are actually telling the exact same story? Just, using different words.
Now, to really get just how radical, how mind-blowing this idea is, we've got to take a step back. We need to look at the old way of thinking, the scientific worldview that this new physics just completely blew apart. People call it the clockwork universe.
So for hundreds of years, right, thanks to guys like Isaac Newton, science had this picture of the universe as this giant, predictable machine, like a perfect clock. Time and space, they were just the rigid box that everything happened in. And what was everything made of? Simple. Tiny, solid, indestructible little bits of stuff. Think of them like super, super tiny billiard balls.
And this billiard ball view made everything seem so neat and tidy. You've got ice, water, steam. That's just the same little molecules moving around in ways we can predict. It was all cause and effect. And that led to a really powerful idea. If you could just know where every single one of those little billiard balls was and where it was going, well, theoretically, you could predict the entire future of the universe. Everything.
This idea got pushed to its absolute limit by a mathematician named Laplace. He basically said, okay, imagine a mind so vast, so intelligent, it could know the exact position and momentum of every single particle in the cosmos at one single instant. For that mind, he said, nothing would be uncertain, no surprises. The future would be laid out just as clearly as the past, a perfect, predictable clockwork universe.
But then everything changed. The 20th century rolls around, and two discoveries basically come along and take a sledgehammer to that perfect, beautiful clock, shattering it into a million pieces.
First up, you've got Einstein. His theory of relativity completely threw out the old box idea. He showed that space and time are actually woven together into this one thing, space-time, and it can bend and stretch. And then his famous equation, E=mc², that showed that matter, those little billiard balls, aren't really solid at all. They're just incredibly concentrated packets of energy. And right on its heels came quantum theory. And when scientists looked into the subatomic world, they found things got really, really weird. Down at that tiny level, nothing is certain anymore. It's all just a game of probabilities and possibilities.
And this is where it gets truly mind-bending. Take something like an electron. We thought it was a tiny little particle, right? Well, it turns out it's also a wave of probability spread out all over the place. It's like it's a particle and a wave at the same time. It's only when we try to look at it, to measure it, that it decides to be in one particular spot. Think about that. The old clockwork universe just can't handle that kind of paradox.
And you have to understand, this wasn't just some minor tweak to the theory. For the physicists making these discoveries, people like Werner Heisenberg, it was a legitimate shock to the system. It felt like the very ground beneath their feet, the solid, dependable ground of science, was literally dissolving. Everything they thought they knew for certain was suddenly up in the air.
So what rose from the ashes of that shattered clockwork universe? A completely new picture of reality. The big takeaway was this: the world is not a collection of separate things. It's a network of relationships. At the most fundamental level, it's this: inseparable, interconnected web. Nothing exists in isolation. A particle, a person, a galaxy, it only has meaning because of its connection to everything else.
Okay, so hold that thought about the interconnected web, because this is where our story takes a wild turn. While physicists in the West were figuring all this out with giant machines and complex math, for thousands of years, mystics in the East had been talking about a very, very similar reality. And they got there not by looking outward, but by looking inward.
Just think about the core teachings of traditions like Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism. What do they all say? Well, first, that everything is connected. It's all one unified whole. Second, reality isn't static. It's a constant dynamic flow. Third, that feeling you have of being a separate me, they say that's an illusion. And finally, all those opposites we see, light and dark, good and bad, they're not really separate. They're just two sides of the same coin, part of one bigger picture.
You've all seen the yin-yang symbol, right? It's the perfect picture of this idea. It's not about a war between black and white. It's about a dynamic, flowing dance. You see how each side has a little dot of the other? They contain each other, flow into each other. It's all about that constant movement, that dynamic unity that creates everything.
So here we are. This is the heart of it all. You've got two completely different paths. On one side, the physicist, with their particle accelerators and chalkboards full of equations, looking out at the universe. On the other, the mystic, sitting in meditation, looking inward. And the crazy part? It looks like they both ended up in the exact same place.
I mean, just look at this. On the left, that's a real photograph from a bubble chamber. Those lines are the paths of subatomic particles. It's literally a picture of that cosmic web of relationships science found. And on the right, well, you recognize that. The ancient symbol for the exact same idea, a dynamic, unified dance. The similarity is, wow, it's pretty striking, isn't it?
Okay, let's put them side by side. Physics tells us the universe is one dynamic, inseparable whole. Nothing makes sense on its own, only through its connections. And mysticism? That's its starting point. The fundamental truth is the unity of everything, whether you call it Brahman or the Tao.
Next, physics had its mind blown by the paradox that something can be two opposite things at once, a wave and a particle. Eastern thought, it's been comfortable with that for centuries. The whole world is seen as this interplay of opposites, yin and yang, that aren't really in conflict, they just are. And maybe this is the deepest connection of all. Quantum physics stumbled upon this incredible fact. You, the observer, are not separate from what you're observing. The very act of looking at something changes it. And what's the whole point of mystical practice? To realize that the separation between you and the world out there is an illusion. To overcome that very divide.
And look, this wasn't just some wild idea from Capra. One of the godfathers of quantum physics, Niels Bohr, said it himself. He basically said that to really wrap their heads around what they were finding in the atomic world, they had to look at the same kinds of questions that people like Buddha and Lao Tzu were dealing with ages ago.
It turns out our everyday language just breaks down when you try to describe this stuff. Our words are built for a world of separate things, tables and chairs. So physics had to start sounding a lot more like a mystic. It had to use paradoxes and metaphors, kind of like Zen riddles, to even hint at what was really going on.
And that leads us to a really beautiful idea from another one of the pioneers, Heisenberg. He said that the most amazing breakthroughs happen right at these intersections, where two totally different ways of thinking come together. So this whole thing, this meeting of physics and mysticism, it isn't just a weird coincidence. It's a place where incredible new ideas can be born.
So it leaves you wondering, right? If these two paths, the logical, rational path of science and the intuitive, inner path of mysticism, if they meet at the very bottom of reality, what else could we find if we learn to walk both paths together? What other amazing truths are just waiting to be discovered at that crossroads of knowledge and wisdom?